Welcome into the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show. It's myself, Jeff Bell. We are here with my co-host, Jagger May, as always. And then we've got a special guest today because we're going to be talking tight ends. And so we brought in the tight end specialist, the man himself from Fantasy Alarm, Andrew Cooper. And so we're going to go through Dynasty tight end tiers. First off, I want to say good morning, Jagger. Welcome in. I'm throwing to you right as you're taking a drink, but no, it's how are you doing?
No, it's okay. I'm good. As always, guys. We've been doing these in the morning, and I live in Colorado, and the rest of the world lives on East Coast, as I've learned. So it's always rough for me, and it's always too early, and I'm always late to every Zoom meeting. So,
yeah, but without further ado, our guest, and we're thrilled that Coop is here to join us. You've done a fantastic best ball guide. I see that it has come out lately, and of course, tight ends just in general, but fantasy football in general. You're one of the sharpest minds in the industry, multiple time FSWA finalist. How are you doing this morning, Coop? I know that it's an early morning for you as well, but you're new to the world of dadhood, getting adjusted to there, and so welcome to the new reality.
Yeah, for dads, this is like the afternoon. That's why you and me,
Right.
to keep Jagger on his toes, we were like, let's push this as early as possible, right? Just see if we can out sharp him with the earliness, and we'll see how that goes.
yeah.
But yeah, we got him pinned
If you
down.
keep
We got him pinned down right now.
The thing is, if you keep going, you'll pass some Meridian, and I'm just up
And then
at
you're
that
out.
point.
Yeah, that's a danger zone. That's a danger zone when you're dealing with a comedian, right? You can't let them get in the dark zone, the David Tell zone there. So no, we knew we had to let the sun go down and come back up before we started the show. And guess what? The sun has risen, and it has risen on the Lord's greatest creation, the tight ends, the uber athletes, the cheat code in fantasy. And with the recent resurgence of some young fellas, a position that's not going anywhere, haters. So let's rock and roll.
Yeah, I think it's almost the opposite. I think it's becoming more and more in vogue. I love the tight end position. It's one of my favorite positions. I think it's the ultimate chess position within an offense. And one of the biggest answers that I've seen to the too high safety that we're seeing with defenses pulling back and allowing a little bit more underneath, a lot more offenses are moving to 12 personnel, and especially high-end offenses moving to 12 personnel. So we'll dive into that. We'll talk about how that's shaping the structure and the landscape of Dynasty moving forward. But first off, be sure to like and subscribe to the new Football Guys Dynasty Football channel on YouTube. We've moved over. All of our video and content are going to be coming out of this Dynasty channel. So like and subscribe. We need those subs. We appreciate all of you.
And also be sure to head over to footballguys.com/plans to get a premium subscription. And all of our elite subscribers get access to our Dynasty IDP. It's best ball season, y'all. It's rookie draft season, y'all. We have everything for you. And it's $70 annually. So again, head over to footballguys.com/plans today.
Yeah, so let's move into our first tier of tight ends. We've got a big tier of tight ends, and tight ends are interesting because we have some variance within our rankings. If you saw the running back episode with Dave Kluge, we had a lot of consensus at the top. Tight ends, we do not have very much consensus at the top. We've got Sam LaPorta, Kyle Pitts, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, and Dalton Kincaid making up that first tier. And a lot of that is because I have players higher and Coop has players higher and Jagger's got his different group. And so diving into it, first off, I think the most interesting, maybe beyond Sam LaPorta kind of moving towards that consensus tight end one within the industry, Coop, you've still got Mark Andrews as your tight end one.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word still there, implying that maybe at 28 years old, we shouldn't be ranking this guy as the top tight end. For me, there's arguments made that this guy should be the top tight end in every single format this year, and I can make those arguments pretty easily. You look around at the tight end position, and the age apex is a lot different than these other ones, like running back, for instance, right? You look at a guy like Travis Kelce, right? He had his first 1,000-yard season at 27 years old. Zach Ertz had his at 28 years old. And now we turn around and look at their first 1,000-yard season, right? We look at Mark Andrews at 28 years old, and we say what? That he's done being an elite player. This guy is a top 5 all-time season as a tight end, right? So what do we think is going to happen? Do we think he's going to pull a Calvin Johnson and surprise retire early 2 years from now, right at 30 years old? For me, I look at him and I say, okay, this guy is at the age apex for the position right now. I mean, for wide receiver, the age apex is 27 to 29 years old. This guy's smack in the middle of the pass catching age apex. And the rarest thing has happened at the tight end position, which is the kind of the golden setup for Dynasty, where a team looks at the pass catchers on the team and they say, we don't need more wide receivers because we have this guy here, right? It happens so rarely with, briefly with Darren Waller, with Travis Kelce, and with Mark Andrews, where, I mean, I'm ahead of the industry on Rashad Bateman, but Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers and who going up against Mark Andrews here? Like, it's so rare that you get a guy at the age apex and the focal point of the offense, and he has a top 5 all-time season. He's the only other guy besides Kelce and LaPorta to be the tight end one. And when I look around the landscape, there's no one else that's really locked in like that. And for me, when I play Dynasty in every format that I play to win, right? Like, if you're in a situation where you picked up an orphan team, or you're doing some sort of productive struggle where you're losing on purpose, then sure, if you don't think you're going to be good within the next 2-3 years, and trade away all your good players. But for the most part, I want the best possible players. And I think Mark Andrews this year has just as good a shot of anybody else as being the tight end one. And I think he can do it for multiple more years in a row.
Yeah, and I love the direction that you went there, talking about that offensive structure within the Baltimore offense. And I kind of let off a little bit talking about the proliferation of 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. And I think Baltimore set up, we didn't really see it last year. Maybe part of it was the injury to Mark Andrews, kind of taking him out of the fold. But we did see Isaiah Likely come on in stretches throughout his career. And so coming from Georgia, that Todd Monken system, having Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers in the same offensive scheme, my expectation was that we would see Andrews and Likely, and we'd really see an offense that would flow through the tight end. Do you think that that's on the table for this year coming up, with the lack of really depth talent that they have at the wide receiver position? And in my mind, I think that people would see that and see that as a negative on Andrews, but I would see it as a positive, as a real commitment that, yes, the tight end is the focal point of this offense.
Yeah, well, they did that for a long time, where, when Mark Andrews had his first top 5 season, his second season in the league, Andrews actually only played like 40% of the snaps because Nick Boyle was the full-time inline tight end. This guy, Mark Andrews, the reality is he plays 85% of his snaps at wide receiver. He blocks on like 2% of pass plays. He's had seasons where he's only blocked on 2 pass plays. Like, he is a wide receiver. So what they do with the rest of those snaps is up to them. The thing about Isaiah Likely is that when you look at his numbers, it's not like they're 2 different type of guys where one plays inline, one plays the slot. They kind of do the exact same thing. Isaiah Likely is there because they like Mark Andrews so much. So if they do go that route, they would have to change how they use Isaiah Likely and kind of make him an inline tight end, right? For me,
Which he's not.
right? So, but the way I look at it in Dynasty is that where I have Mark Andrews, I just go out and overpay for Isaiah Likely, because Mark Andrews, he really is the only tight end, maybe like ever, that's had a actual legitimate handcuff that we can just plug and play if he gets hurt, right? If Sam LaPorta gets hurt, you're cooked. You're not going to go out and start Shane Zylstra or whoever else, right? Or I guess maybe you can super deep leagues or whatever. But Isaiah Likely, we just plugged him right in because he was used identically, and he was getting 5, 6, 7 targets a game. So for me, like, there's a lot that goes into the ranking Mark Andrews this high, though I completely understand ranking some of these other younger guys higher if that's where you're at in your build, right? So it's like, I don't look at where you guys have these other guys ranked. I just look at it and say that if you're one of the best teams in your league, it's hard to argue against Mark Andrews, right? And the thing about us being all over the place with the top 6 or so guys is that it's honestly not that big a deal, because I think that tiers are condensed, right? It would be a bigger deal if we had a really weird mix of names in there, but it's all the same names, just kind of in different order.
Yeah. When I agree with that. Yeah, go ahead, Jag.
I was gonna say I agree with that 100%. And like, for me, it's just like it's almost like your brain is working like an Excel file, or basically it's how you sort players. For me, it's I have Sam LaPorta, Kyle Pitts, and Trey McBride higher because I think they can have Mark Andrews production and they're younger. That is it. Like, and that is the extent of my logic. And that's not. And that's not saying that I don't understand other facets or something like that. It's just, for me, at the end of the day, there's a lot of information, and I just try to simplify certain things when, like you said, we have to put these in a linear tier, whereas they're in the same bucket. Like, I'm not going to fight anyone. Like Jeff has Dalton Kincaid as the tight end one. Do I think that's a little bit wild? Like, a little bit, but like Dalton Kincaid is a tight end one. Like he is like one of the top. Like, I love Dalton Kincaid. Like, it's not like I think Dalton Kincaid sucks. So that's the interesting thing about doing this exercise.
I mean, I have a stack of Dalton Kincaid rookie cards right next to me right now. I am as big of a Dalton Kincaid fan as you're going to get, and I'm rooting for him to be good. You know what I mean? It's just when I look around at some of those guys in that range, I wonder if they can reach the heights of Mark Andrews at any point. And we talk about, Sam LaPorta was tight end one, but what did he have last year? 50 yards a game, 51 yards a game. Like,
there's a lot of tight end, a lot of touchdowns.
His season wasn't at the level of Mark Andrews's tight end one overall season, because his was, top 5. And you look at some of these other guys, and like, I love Trey McBride, right? Like, that's a player that I liked a lot, but we don't know the direction that team's going to go in. We don't know that they're going to, when this rebuild is done, with Jonathan Gannon and the new group coming in, we don't know that they're going to say, okay, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, and we don't need nothing else. For this season, yes, that's the case. But what happens, we've seen it time and time again, where the very next season or the following season, they go in and add one more player, and now you're looking at Dallas Goedert, where it's obvious that A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are the top 2 targets on the team. We need our guy to ideally lead the team in targets the way Kelce or Andrews does, but at least be top 2. That's what the vast majority of top 5 finishes for tight end have come from, guys that are top 2 targets on the team. And the guys that do sneak in there, it's usually pretty inconsistent and super annoying. Like Robert Tonyan, when he had 11 touchdowns from week to week, it was brutal. And then championship week rolled around, and what happens? He has 1 reception. It's not a touchdown, and he pulls your pants down in front of all your friends, right? So, like, you gotta focus on targets first and foremost. That's why for me, I look at Andrews. He's just so safe. And again, I love that you bring up the term linear rankings, because I personally hate them. I hate linear rankings, man. They drive me nuts. I don't do any sort of like rankings challenge contests, because again, that's a different game to sit down and say, here's the formula for this contest. I'm going to score the most points by ranking, Tyler Higbee tight end 9. He's going to finish exactly tight end 9. The tight end 9 isn't helping anybody win a fantasy league. Yep. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm with you that linear rankings, forget them.
Especially in Dynasty, they hold like even like less value on, like a lot less value in Dynasty. That's like, okay, that's like best ball talk in my opinion with linear rankings, which I love some best ball, but that's a different game.
Yeah, there's so many ways to play Dynasty too. Like I've seen people that I think it was Mike Clay that like he just collects value. That's it. Like that's all he cares about is getting the guy at the cheapest price ever. Jeff, I believe you actually was it Mike Clay, or who is the one that typically does that?
I do that as well. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. I like to accumulate value within my roster. I don't worry too much about positional construction. I'm trying to buy guys that I assume are going to raise in value, and then I'm kind of like like your guy Bill Belichick when it comes to my dynasty rosters. I like to get out on a guy a year early versus a year late, and so I do kind of use them in that window, kind of view them as 3 to 4 year window, depending on what position they might be. And then I'm kind of looking to step out relative early to where most of the market would be looking to make that move. Because once that conversation starts, that value just drops precipitously. We see how reactionary is keep, trade, cut. And I think that's probably maybe arguably the best view of the market, or at least people view that as the best view of the market, which in turn becomes the market because they view that as the market. So I think that's one of the areas that I look at the way that I play Dynasty, because I'm not one of these people that likes to ride a player until the wheels fall off, because that is just lost value off of your roster. A player like Derrick Henry, maybe this is the last good sell window with excitement around Derrick Henry going to a Baltimore Ravens offense. And if anything wrong happens, then how much value do you just lose off the potential of your roster? And kind of one of those things that you continue to, like, I emphasize building youth. I emphasize a cohesive unit that's moving together, that's kind of operating within the same production window, the same age range. And I think that's how you accrue the highest value within your dynasty roster, create the best, deepest highest potential rosters.
And if you're a big trader, that's the way you definitely got to do it.
I love the trade.
Especially if you love to trade, then do it that way, because you can boil everything down to picks. And if you just focus on value in your startup, that's the way to do it. And just want to say, I keep trade cut. I don't think I've ever logged into that website and seen Javonte Williams ranked in the same place. He's that like certain players like that. Like he was as high as like 2 at one point. He dropped down to like 75. Now it's just every day you log in and someone's got a different opinion. But it is interesting to get all those opinions in one spot.
And since we're talking about tight ends, Kyle Pitts is another one. Like watching that dude's value is hilarious, man. It's like watching a cryptocurrency. And what's wild is it's like not. He's more of like gold in my opinion. Yeah, it's like, and like to piggyback a little bit of what you guys said. It's a lot of what Jeff said is like I'll try to acquire value. Like I have Josh Allen, and I am doing everything I can to acquire Anthony Richardson plus. Like basically for me, I tend to have a lot of the same rosters, but here's my logic. And I know this is, again, guys, I try to keep it simple, stupid. I want all studs. I know that sounds dumb. I want all studs. Like, let's say if I have Evan Engram, I love Evan Engram, and I have a lot of rosters built around Evan Engram. But I am constantly trying to move up to tier 1 to go get like Mark Andrews, LaPorta, Kyle Pitts. It is constant. And I'll keep loving Evan Engram, and he'll keep giving me points. But my job in Dynasty is to get tier 1 players. My wide receivers, like people like, well, why don't you like Mike Evans? I don't particularly roster Mike Evans. Like, well, why? Because I have so many rosters with Brandon Ayuk, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith. Like, I just don't stay with Mike Evans. Yeah, but I digress. Sorry.
To your point on Evan Engram, though, I'm a massive Evan Engram fan, right? And we stuck with him the whole way. It worked out nice. I think that's what's going to happen next with Kyle Pitts, which is that Evan Engram was a top 5 tight end with Eli Manning. Then he played with a quarterback who will not be named for a number of years and was not that good. And everyone said he couldn't catch and that he stunk, even though his peers are voting him into the Pro Bowl. And then he goes to play with Trevor Lawrence, and all of a sudden he's top 5 again. He leads the league in receptions. But I'm with you that you can
with 2 TDs. We're like, what?
Right.
Yeah. It's like ridiculous.
He led the league in screens with 21. That was a big part of why the production looked the way it did. But he was top. He had the 4th most receptions of any player in the league. But to the point on Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce and why they stay a tier ahead of a guy like Engram is that team didn't sit back and say, we have Evan Engram, so we're all set, right? Like they could have easily said, we have Evan Engram, we have Christian Kirk, we have Zay Jones. That's the offense. And we have Evan catching 100 gazillion balls. So we'll just keep doing that. They didn't do that. They went before they went out and got Calvin Ridley. Now they went out and got Brian Thomas Jr. Those are indicators to us that potentially this team isn't content. We want the team to be content with what they have. And for me, at the end of this year, my rankings could get jumbled up if it's confirmed that Kyle Pitts with Kirk Cousins is the dude. If it's confirmed that Sam LaPorta actually takes a step forward, and then now they're in a spot where, of course, they're not going to add another wide receiver, right? Trey McBride, same thing. Like if these guys confirm that information, especially next offseason, if those teams do nothing, those guys are just like so moved up and locked in. But to me, it's still a little speculative right now. Whereas Mark Andrews, that's done. Like he's in, and they've already pretty much told us, that they're going to let Odell walk and they're going to let these other guys walk, and that's going to be the dog. Dalton Kincaid, another interesting one where I love that guy, man, and I want them to commit to him as the guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's just tied in one.
I'm going to grab the mic here and talk about Dalton Kincaid because I've been itching to do for like 15 minutes now. No, I think that when you look at Kincaid, you talk about a team that did a lot, but did they really do anything? When you look at what the Bills did with their wide receiver room, I think maybe adding Keon Coleman might be something major. Other than that, I think they shifted some pieces around, but they really set themselves up for Dalton Kincaid to be that leading target for that team potentially. And I think that when you look at how teams have traditionally operated within the NFL, they're chasing at the top, be it the Bills are chasing the Chiefs, or maybe the Jets or the Patriots might be chasing the Bills to get to the top of their division. You're always trying to climb up. And so I think when you look at the Bills, they mirrored a lot of what the Chiefs did with Travis Kelce being their primary target. And even when you kind of narrow it down and you look at what that brain trust coming from Carolina. If you remember back when a lot of those guys, McDermott and when Brandon Beane were at Carolina, Greg Olsen was the leading receiver for a lot of those teams. And so I think that they saw that Greg Olsen, Christian McCaffrey kind of being the lead receiver for Cam Newton. And so then they added James Cook to receiving back, and they added Dalton Kincaid as the tight end there. And so it's interesting to me. It's curious to me how much of I don't know that there's a fade on Dalton Kincaid within the industry, but I think usually we would see a lot more excitement around recognizing the high-end potential for Josh Allen, recognizing the high-end potential for the Bills offense. I do think our brains are a little bit broken on rookie production because of what we saw from Puka Nacua, because of what we saw from Jamar Chase as a rookie, because you're having these guys, Dalton Kincaid smashed tight end records for the franchise, rookie records for the franchise in receiving. You have like Josh Downs broke Colts records for receiving. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba even broke Seahawks rookie records for receiving, but we're all looking at those guys as being disappointments and being, well, they weren't Puka Nacua, so they can't possibly be good. When you look at traditionally the way that an offense would build around a player and the way that the player's career would go, I mean, we're seeing massive green flags around what Dalton Kincaid did his first year, the way that they're set up. And then we talk about having on the 2 tight ends offense, you have Dawson Knox there locked in to be that inline tight end, which allows Dalton Kincaid to operate as a receiver, really the big slot receiver. They talked about they're not going to use Keon Coleman as the big slot. I know that was kind of the talk around his profile coming in, putting him as a big slot because they got Dalton Kincaid operating that position. And so that's where I'm very, very bullish on Dalton Kincaid. And you can call me a homer if you want, but I think when you look at a first round rookie tight end that really was very productive his rookie year in a offensive structure that has as high a ceiling as just about anything in the league, I mean, I don't know why we're not all in on that.
I'll play devil's advocate here. And again, this is me definitely picking holes because, like I said at the beginning of the episode, I'm not going to fight you too hard about Dalton Kincaid. Like, I think he's a great player. It's Curtis Samuel. To me, he is the Pete Davidson of wide receivers, if you will. I don't know what people see in him, but he keeps moving to new homes,
Yep.
and he tends to like live in the same area. And then Khalil Shakir, like the trio of them, that bothers me. If one of them was gone, I would feel a little bit better. And again, guys, when you're doing a linear ranking, this is what I'm like, okay, I gotta make something up to ding Dalton Kincaid. Essentially, right. Kind of, that's what it feels like. And that's my logic a little bit. Whereas like Sam LaPorta is like, he has a clear role. Kyle Pitts is a little bit hopium, a little bit, but like we at least know what he can be. And to piggyback off what Jeff said, people forget that he like broke like rookie records and I mean like NFL records for a tight end. It's like, stop letting Desmond Ridder affect you so much. And, like, and again, Trey McBride, I think is like the clear second target. Like Michael Wilson, as much as I loved him last year, I probably should have moved more of my shares last year instead of holding on to him like a little raccoon in a dumpster, like don't touch my garbage. But like, here I am. Anyway, I digress. Right. But like that's my argument on Kincaid and why he's at the bottom is like, he has more competition for where he lives in the field than everyone else.
Yeah. And it's crazy that I'm actually looks like I'm the low guy in Kincaid, even though that's my baby. And I was waving the banner on that guy like crazy. And to Jeff's point, if Sam LaPorta didn't exist, then we would have him so much higher. And again, like the season Kincaid had, to me, wasn't that far off. I mean, Kincaid got banged up, with a couple touchdown difference, right? I look at Kincaid upside wise, and the big key for me is first downs. Because when you really boil down real football, it's about 2 things, right, boys? It's about first downs, getting them, and then touchdowns, right? And I guess converting the field goal if need be, but that's kind of an afterthought, really. It's about first downs and touchdowns. And they just lost the guy that's led the team in first downs 4 straight years, right? Somebody needs to step up in that situation. That is you want the guy that is that guy. Because that's how Wes Welker and Julian Edelman and Stephon Diggs and all these guys get all these targets, is that when your back's against the wall, you need somebody that can run a 6, 7, 8-yard route and catch the ball. And that was always Diggs. So somebody's got to step up and do that. And that person gets the benefit of extra targets, no doubt. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping it's going to be Kincaid. The thing for me is why I have guys like Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers ahead of Kincaid and Trey McBride boils down to the ingredients that go into truly mind-breaking tight end seasons, right? And the number one thing is being a top 2 target on the team. The number 2 thing is pass blocking on less than 15% of your snaps, which none of these guys have to worry about at all, right? But there are certain guys that have had issues with that. Like George Kittle, for instance. That's what's stopping him from having 1,500 yards, right? Because he'd be capable of it if he was getting more than like 90, 100 targets. If he was just playing if he was one of these guys playing slot wide receiver, getting 150 targets, Zach Ertz once got 150 targets. Can you imagine what George Kittle would do with 150 targets? He actually did have that many one year, and it was crazy, right? The reason that you have to have Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers ahead is that they have that level of athleticism to do more with less, right? You look at Kyle Pitts and George Kittle, and they can break off 40-plus yard plays. George Kittle's broken off more 40-plus yard plays since he's been in the league than any other player. There's only been 2 tight ends to have 3 or more 40-plus yard plays in one season over the last like 7 years. That's Kittle and Chigoziem Okonkwo on just like a random season there. George yeah, very great. George Kittle is the only, and not only has Kittle done that, George Kittle has a season where he had 3 60-plus yard touchdowns. That's why George Kittle goes out last year and he has 60-something receptions for over 1,000 yards. Whereas like Jake Ferguson has 70-something receptions and he has 760 yards, right? It's how Kyle Pitts on 60 receptions his rookie year had over 1,000 yards. And the speed of Kyle Pitts and to some degree Brock Bowers, who is faster and he has this crazy vertical and this athleticism that's just slightly better than Dalton Kincaid and Trey McBride, and why he was a higher prospect. That's what's got to put him slightly ahead for me. But I mean, I have Bowers at 5 and Kincaid at 6, and that could flip week 1 of this season for me. It's like it's that close, but it's just like you have to respect that. You have to respect the ceiling on those guys that run 4-5 range 40s.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a natural segue into our next tier where we do have Brock Bowers and Travis Kelce, really kind of the polar opposites in terms of age and maybe production cycle here with Travis Kelce and Brock Bowers. Bowers at 6 and Kelce at 7. But Jag, I know I interrupted your point.
Oh no, I was just kind of gonna piggyback a little bit off what Coop was saying, and especially if I was gonna say like run after catch, like guys who can, like it's huge for tight ends. It's everything, like can you make a big play? And that's why I chase athleticism. So I don't think I have enough Theo Johnson, to be honest, like especially how much he costs because he's super athletic. That's why I have. Who did the Jaguars draft last year? I don't remember. Brenton Strange. There you go. yeah. I was like, maybe he could be something.
Right. If Mike, just imagine if Mike Gesicki could break a tackle. Like, it's like it's funny that it's like the little things in this game that are the difference between being the high end guys and not. But yeah, let's get to this next tier, Jeff.
Yeah, so we got Brock Bowers, we got Travis Kelce. I think that Bowers is so interesting, and it seems to be a fade on landing spot on him. I think a lot of when it comes to maybe fantasy thinking, the thought there is we look at depth charts, we look at the position listed next to a player's name, and we see, well, we liked Michael Mayer, and now they have Brock Bowers, and they both have tight end next to their name. How can this work? And I think that when you really like break it down, I think you had a great intro at the top talking about inline tight ends and move tight ends. And that's what Mayer profiles as a very high end classic inline tight end. And Brock Bowers is that move tight end, really the archetype of that, a player that can work out of the backfield. And I've been a football fan long enough. I remember those great Patriot offenses that had Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. And Hernandez was, I think I did comp Brock Bowers to Aaron Hernandez because of the way that you can use him out of the backfield, the versatility that he brings to be able to move around the field. He's really the locked-in slot receiver for the Raiders. And I think that's the way we need to start thinking about a lot of these tight ends. And really the tight ends that you want to target in fantasy is he a slot receiver? Because that's what Brock Bowers is to me.
Yeah, and I'll say this, that is the battle, because we know Devontae Adams is going to get his 150-something targets. You know what I mean? So it's Jacoby Myers versus Brock Bowers for targets. I'm with you. I know Michael Mayer doesn't matter to me for fantasy football for that purpose. The question is whether Brock Bowers starts out as an every down player or if he's a kind of part-time rotational player. But I think he will be an every down player. And the thing that I think a lot of people need to do, and Jeff, you kind of alluded to it just now, is when you're doing your comps, if you're a person that does player comps, take the positional labels off. Because when you do that, when you take the tight end and wide receiver labels off, you go in, and a lot of these tight ends are just going to have tight end comps because there's no wide receivers that are 255 pounds and comp to Tip Ryman, right? But with some of these other guys, you'll find that there are better comps. Like when you go in and look at Evan Engram with the labels off, a guy that, is 6'3", 234 at the combine and ran a 4.42, there's no tight end comps. But there's some wide receiver comps that are in terms of size and speed and even college production are like identical. Like Andre Johnson and guys like Demaryius Thomas, rest in peace. Those guys, 6'3", 230 something pounds, 4.42, 4.43 40s. I mean, like those are the comps. And when I look at Brock Bowers, there's a couple tight end comps, but the real comps end up being guys like Jordy Nelson. Like that's the kind of player we have here when you look at his production and his size and his speed, right? So when I look at Brock Bowers, there's a real possibility that this guy just plays wide receiver. And to bring his name up again one more time, thank goodness for Mike Gesicki. Thank goodness for Mike Gesicki because he was tagged with the franchise tag as a tight end the year after he played 90% of his snaps at wide receiver. And he actually played fewer inline, pretty much the same number of inline snaps as Allen Lazard. And he did not fight the tight end tag. And that hopefully will serve as precedent, him and Jimmy Graham, to not allow guys like Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts to escape that tight end eligibility for fantasy football. Because that with guys like that, that's the only concern in my eyes. These guys are super mega stars, and the only concern is that their agent says we can get more money if you're a wide receiver. So Mike Gesicki is on the night watch. Like he was the guy on the wall making sure that nobody can get that switched, because how can you now? If Gesicki is a tight end after, again, 90% of his snaps a wide receiver, then everybody.
Well, I think the guy that really did that is Travis Kelce. I mean, because I think Travis Kelce, that his agent could have petitioned and pushed for him to be a wide receiver. He is the Chiefs slot receiver. They added Jared Wiley now in the draft. They had used Blake Bell in the past. They used Noah Gray in the past. And I think that's one of the things that, if you just look at the stat sheet and you see these different wide receivers running around in that offense, you don't really realize how often they are in 12 personnel and how often they are using Travis Kelce really as a wide receiver. And so that's the guy. I think that was a really selfless move, probably low key, that people don't realize when it comes to roster construction and building the Chiefs roster, for him to not push to be paid as a wide receiver and for him to accept being at the top of the tight end market.
Yeah, and that market is so crushed because of that. Like you look at other positions, like look at the running backs. They're changing teams, a ton of guys hitting free agency. Who is the best tight end that actually hit free agency this year? Because Dalton Schultz stayed put and Hunter Henry stayed put. Like the highest paid tight end that changed teams this year, I think, was Colby Parkinson. That's the discount that you can get on tight ends, and teams obviously know that because they keep franchise tagging these guys and then giving them a contract that's just higher than the franchise tag, but it's, again, Evan Engram, fourth most receptions of any player, and he's getting paid like $12 million a year.
I'd argue Jonnu Smith, but that's like teams still love versatile H-backs. Like Jonnu Smith, I don't think he sucks as much as people hate what he did to Kyle Pitts, and he really disappointed a lot of Patriots fans because of their misuse of him.
Fault,
and it's like to go
throw on Jonnu Smith real quick is that he got paid a good chunk of money. There was always going to be a market for Jonnu Smith because he got released. He got released instead of becoming a free agent, which means he didn't count against the compensatory pick formula. So there was a little bit of mini bidding war there among the teams protecting those comp picks. Like, so the Dolphins lost Christian Wilkins and a bunch of those guys in free agency, right? And those guys, like Wilkins, is going to bring back a third round comp pick. You don't want to cancel that out signing Colby Parkinson. So, Jonnu, a little bidding war there, but I kind of sneaky like Jonnu.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But tight end leans to the.
We both cut off Jagger there, so I want to hear what Jagger had to say.
You're right.
Basically, I mean, it's a little late now. I've been trying to say that people forget that, like, at least for me, Michael Mayer was a full tier below Sam LaPorta and Dalton Kincaid. Like, I think he might have been my tight end 4. I'm trying to think who was my tight end 3 at the time. Like Michael Mayer is one of those players where you really like him. He's really tough. A coach is going to love him, and he's always going to have a place on a team. But he does not have the physical tools to ever be any of the guys ahead of him. I was buying Michael Mayer. I was like, he could be like Trey McBride, but he's not like athletic like Trey McBride. He can't break tackles and he's a tough player. But like that's basically all I was gonna say. And it's like you made a huge point on like usage with like Brock Bowers is everything that you want. You're this athletic white dude that you've seen ball out. Like we finally seen the NFL move to where like we have usage for these guys. Like you said, he's closer to like Cooper Kupp than he is to like Mark Andrews, you know? So,
yeah. And with Mayer, like now he's on a trajectory, the inline trajectory where those guys have broken out, but they have to wait for their window of opportunity. Dallas Goedert ended up stuck in line behind Ertz. I mean, McBride himself was stuck in line behind Ertz, and Ertz got like 40-something targets over the first 5 or 6 games last year. He got hurt week 8. But like Delaney Walker was stuck behind Vernon Davis for 7 years. And then at 30 years old, had a good season. Martellus Bennett, like that's the trajectory that Michael Mayer is on now. So deep rosters, you just throw them on the back burner because you can't trade them for anything. But yeah, I mean, it hurts that this team took best player available, and the best player available turned out to be a guy that, quote unquote, is a tight end and he's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but really, the tight end leans into the planet theory, and the planet theory is basically there's only so many big men that can move the way that big men can move. And when you look at tight end, there's only so many players that fit that size profile that offenses are looking for, that fit the athleticism profile as well. That's one of the reasons why, if you really want to walk on who is going to be picked early in the draft, relative athletic score, I think, means more to tight end than any other position, because teams are just desperately searching for players that fit the size, athleticism profile, whereas, you know, running backs kind of just shoot off assembly lines, and receivers, there's like 5 different wide receiver positions, so you can kind of just move a guy around where you need him. But yeah, tight end, you're looking for only so many guys that can move, and so that's why when a team finds them, they get married to them and they don't want to get rid of them, because they do become such a key focal point of that offense, and really it's a fulcrum point around how you're going to offensive structure between if you want to play heavier, you're putting more tight ends into the game. If you want to play lighter, you're removing them, but kind of finding those Swiss Army pieces, like, and that's the biggest thing with Bowers, I think, is that you can use those players and play heavy and play light at the same time, and that's when you really put a defense into conflict.
And you're going to see more, even more of those guys making the roster now, based on what Bill Belichick said, which is that this new kickoff format heavily favors those players now compared to the old one favored cornerbacks and wide receivers. He said this one, you're going to see more tight end fullbacks, because guys like Tip Ryman go in the 3rd round specifically because he's a mauler blocker and he's built exactly for this new play that is actually a big part of the game now, because it's going to encourage more run backs.
It's like a rugby player. And then like guys, to give everyone an example, NFL teams are willing to draft and let guys who have never caught a pass in a college game and have just been failed basketball players and let them sit for 3 years to see what happens. So
for real. Yeah. George Fant is the most interesting player to me, because if you go back and look for George Fant is now an offensive tackle and he put on weight. But if you go back and look at type in George Fant college highlights, it brings up like Western Kentucky, and it's him like dunking and doing up and unders. Like he was a basketball player. Seahawks were like, you're going to be a tight end for us. And then it turned out that he was a good blocker, and he just beefed up. You look at pictures of this guy and go back and look at his college highlights. It's crazy, the transformation. You know what I mean? But if that's your meal ticket, that's your meal ticket. You got to do what you got to do. And now he's a multimillionaire. So
I'm going to go off on a wild tangent here on a super, super deep sleeper, because we have Coop and I want to pick his brain a little bit. Stone Smart from the Chargers.
That's my guy.
That's a player that kind of is way off the radar. But when you look at the Chargers, obviously they brought in Hurst. They brought in one other Disley.
Will Disley, yeah.
But I think that when that offense that really revolves around the tight end, having wide open when it comes to tight end, that's a player that is converted from a wide receiver and kind of fits that athletic profile. That's been, I think that there's a multi-year rundown on those conversion type players of if they can hit or not. But I do kind of wonder your thoughts on him.
Yeah, so that's been my guy, man. If you type Stone Smart with 2 T's into Twitter, it's a lot of just me shouting into the void, and no one responding. But let me give you the rundown. So like you look at Jim Harbaugh, like his offenses, he's had a lot of different types of tight ends. He's had, like Luke Schoonmaker, who's like an inline type guy, Erick All, who ended up transferring to Iowa. Obviously, they just had the guy that got
Colson Loveland.
Colson Loveland. That's the guy. That's the guy that he's more of like the wide receiver type. This guy's stone smart. Of course, he's different than the rest of the guys on the roster. Like Donald Parham's a big inline goon. Hayden Hurst probably the most pass catching, skewing guy. So he's the barrier to entry. But this guy's stone smart, checks off every tight end meme box you can think of, right? And they're memes for a reason, right? The converted wide receiver, the converted basketball player. So stone smart. Grew up, both of his parents are basketball players, like SEC basketball players, right? So both parents basketball players. He grows up a quarterback that plays every sport, including basketball. Then he converts to wide receiver. Then he converts to tight end at the next level. So this guy is a converted quarterback. So quarterback like Logan Thomas, wide receiver like Juwan Johnson, basketball player like Antonio Gates, right?
He's like an infinity stone, man. He's like,
yeah. And you'll appreciate this, Jagger, if you have not heard it. To cap it all off, his full name is Stone Cold Smart.
Oh,
They made his middle name Cole, dude.
Be right back, guys. I'm going to the waiver wire.
Every day, Jagger Stone Smart just got added.
I do Jag and Joey Wright of all people. Stone Cold Smart, dude. And last year when he scored that 50-yard touchdown, man, we were going wild. Even I had said earlier in the season, I think it was in the off season, like week 1. I think it was on Club Fantasy FL or Fantasy and Frames, and I was like, if he scores a touchdown this year, I'll come on and do the Stone Cold beer chug with you guys. And that was a mess after he scored that touchdown. So yeah, shout out Stone Cold Smart, baby. That's our guy.
All right, we can move into tier 3 now. Keep things on the rails maybe a little bit. We've got
detour to tier like 9 real quick.
Yeah,
Smart.
TJ Hockenson, Evan Engram, George Kittle, and David Njoku in tier 3, and I think that's really a clear separation. That's really the last tier that you want to be operating in. I think, especially for redraft, but probably for Dynasty too, because you start to land in guys that really have questionable roles or questionable offensive upside once you get outside of that tier.
Yeah, this is a no zone. Like, and again, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I'm aggressively trying to move these players. Like I got a lot of David Njoku last year on rebuilding teams because he was so cheap. And like basically, if you look at my portfolio, I have almost 100% roster share of some combo of LaPorta, Bride, Pitts, Evan Engram, and David Njoku, because like I knew LaPorta and he was cheap in rookie drafts, and all these other guys were incredibly cheap when I was buying them. David Njoku, I don't want anything to do with the Browns passing offense. I love David Njoku in a vacuum, but I don't want anything to do with the Browns offense. And right now he holds his value where I'd rather move up. If I'm moving back, it's to get Ben Sinnott. You don't want to go back out of this tier, guys. Like there's no tearing down here. There's just blowing up your team. You want to go get other pieces like running backs or wide receivers. I've never owned TJ Hockenson. He's someone I've tried to own, but like it's almost as soon as like I fail at getting a trade, he gets injured or something. I don't play the injury game or something like that, but I just don't particularly own him. And then George Kittle is surprisingly a fun. I've failed at getting all the guys I've really wanted. Now I have George Kittle. Right. You know?
Yeah, Kittle, like we're holding on to the hope that Ayuk gets traded, but again, he's a unicorn in the sense that he's not really a top 2 target on the team, and he blocks on a ton of pass plays. But his athletic ability and that scheme allow for him to have big upside. And this kind of is an argument in favor of Jonnu Smith as well, is that they use the fullback so much that it highly consolidates the targets. But Kyle Juszczyk is going to play 50% of the snaps and get like 1 or 2 targets. You go in any given game, you can bet on the Kyle Juszczyk 0.5 receptions line that you can bet there. Having those guys that play a ton of snaps but don't get a ton of targets is awesome for everybody else. So, and same with Alec Ingold with the Dolphins. But yeah, I just worry that he's not a focal point. He doesn't really get peppered with targets. With TJ Hockenson, I mean, talk about, is he a top 2 target on the team? I don't know. With Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, now he loses Kirk Cousins, which was, say what you will about him, his volume has been up there with anybody, right? And with this new quarterback, it's probably going to be McCarthy, could be Darnold, but every other player gets to work out all offseason with this quarterback, while Hockenson is going to be over there on crutches, right? So for me, that's concerning. And in Njoku, there's tons of red flags. Tons of red flags in that the backup quarterbacks were targeting him 7 times a game. Deshaun Watson was only targeting him 5 times a game. Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, dialed up 20 screens for Njoku, second most to only Evan Engram. Well, Alex Van Pelt is gone now. He's now with the Patriots. And of course, Kevin Stefanski is going to, it's his offense as well, and he's going to keep running the way he wants to run it. But, anytime there's a change at all and your guy's at the very top, you have to be concerned, right? Yeah. And on top of that, like, the only people that really should be in on Njoku are the true, like, Jerry Jeudy haters, because there's a real world where Jerry Jeudy ends up being the second target after Mark. And if you truly don't think that Jerry Jeudy stinks, Steve Smith Sr. probably has a lot of David Njoku in his dynasty leagues, but you have to account all those things are negative. I didn't really see many positives for Njoku this offseason. So yeah, that's the crew there. And then that's where you cut it off, right? And then Engram, because of his size and his play style, I love him. He's going to get the targets in tight end premium and PPR, great, but he's never been a big touchdown guy, and that's a skill. The ability to create separation, a skill that guys like Jordy Nelson had, and a guy like Julio Jones, he never really had that. Maybe he's too pure of a guy to push off a little bit, but sometimes you got to push off a little bit and get the separation in the red zone and get those touchdowns. And I'm just not sure Evan Engram quite has that in his bag.
No,
yeah,
he's a big slot.
Yeah.
And one of the things I enjoy about the way you look at the position, Q, is you're looking for top 2 targets within the team. And I think that really kind of this tier is personified by, if somebody gets hurt on the team, then you might have a top 2 target and they're good enough that they can deliver on it, but they're probably not a top 2 target.
Right.
And I think that's kind of identifies this tier.
It keeps people coming back to Dallas Goedert, where every year somebody gets hurt, misses a couple games, and Dallas Goedert gets juiced up for a couple games. Yep. He's a double handcuff plus, which is kind of nice. Either wide receiver gets hurt, now he's the dude for a little bit, but he's also a guy that doesn't really get a lot of targets. So I mean, a lot of red zone targets.
Yeah, and that's like your worry about Trey McBride. I think worst case scenario for Trey McBride is he becomes George Kittle. And I don't mean that as so much usage, because Trey McBride is not a good blocker. But as far as like, a lot of these players are just high variance players. You're going to start these guys every week and you're going to be pissed off for half of them. And then they're going to be the reason why you're the top scorer on other times of the week. And that's what's unfortunate. Like, you have to embrace the variance in these players. Like, the only one that I might tear down to, and Evan Engram and Hockenson aren't included, actually, basically Njoku. I would trade Njoku for Pat Freiermuth.
I love Freiermuth. This year I do.
Yeah, because like people forget that I guess we're moving to tier 4. Sorry, Jeff, to push.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's segue into tier 4. Pat Freiermuth, Jake Ferguson, Ben Sinnott, and then Michael Mayer and Dallas Goedert. And natural segue, you guys know what you're doing, your pros, and so I'll let you go on that one.
Yeah, but basically, this tier, Ben Sinnott I would take, and Pat Freiermuth. Like, people like, I don't want Pat Freiermuth because of Arthur Smith and what he did to Kyle Pitts. Pat Freiermuth and Kyle Pitts are 2 different kinds of players. Like, they're not even remotely the same. And I think Pat Freiermuth is closer to what Jonnu Smith is, and the usage there, because he's a versatile player. And to me, he's a type of tight end that gets production in an Arthur Smith offense. So I've been actually comfortable moving. Like, I had a team with Sam LaPorta and Trey McBride. I've been comfortable moving Trey McBride to go get Drake May or a quarterback or something like that, to fill a need, because I've had Pat Freiermuth. I don't know if I'm crazy or holding out hope because I have so many Pat Freiermuth shares because he's been so cheap, but I tend to just like to get good players and hope it works out.
Well, that's the big thing with Freiermuth, is that, have you ever heard anybody say that guy sucks?
Yeah.
Everybody likes the player. Everyone thinks he's a good player, but the situation's been bad. Now with Arthur Smith, I mean, People are like, oh yeah, what if he gives him the Kyle Pitts treatment? Kyle Pitts had 90 targets last year. Kyle Pitts had the same
Yeah.
number of targets as George Kittle last year, right? Like, it's not like he was, and that's coming off a bum knee, right? And Arthur Smith, Ryan Tannehill was QB7 with Arthur Smith. Matt Ryan had the 11th most pass attempts and 11th most passing yards with Arthur Smith, right? It's Desmond Ridder was the whole problem. He was the problem the entire time, right? So,
Yep.
I'm not as like, it's fun to hate on him, and I will continue to do so. But I think it's gone a little too far. Mike Tomlin, has never had a losing season, and Russell Wilson. People say that he doesn't throw over the middle. Well, you go on Pro Football Focus and look at the stats, and every year for 10 years in a row now, he's thrown in most of his passes and his yards over the middle. And Jimmy Graham coming off a torn patellar tendon, which is a death sentence in this league, right? Like Gerard Mayo is a coach now because of the torn patellar. Victor Cruz and David Boston and Cadillac Williams, the list goes on. He came off one of those injuries and caught 10 touchdowns from Russell Wilson and had 90 targets, right? Every top 5 tight end going back 20 years exactly has had 90 targets or 10 touchdowns. And I'm not trying to predict touchdowns. So 90 targets, all I need in this world. Give me 90 targets. And Deontay Johnson being gone, a guy that was getting 9 targets a game over the last 4 years, like, you can't just give those all to Freiermuth, but they get spread out among the guys that are left. George Pickens and Roman Wilson. I mean, Roman Wilson, a rookie, going to come in and really command like 120, 130 targets? I don't think so, man. So I'm in on Freiermuth, and a guy that's been in my fades article 2 years in a row now is now a guy that you turn around and say, why not? Right. And that's the beauty of Dynasty, and the beauty of what we do is that every year's a new year, and you get to go out and do shows like this where you can get that point out there, because a lot of people would consider me a Freiermuth hater, which I don't hate players. I hate ADPs, except for I don't really like Tyler Higbee, but everybody else I like.
I'm really excited because you guys have completely sold me on Freiermuth, because I was definitely somebody that looked at it as, I just don't want pieces of an Arthur Smith offense. But when you look at having Darnell Washington there, he can really only play in, like, he's an extra tackle. And then having Connor Hayward, you're looking at these players that are really auxiliary pieces that allow you to a lot of skill players. Your job is either to get the ball or to allow the skill players that do get the ball to do their jobs. And so those are guys that do that. And that's one of the biggest things you talked about with use check, is having these extra skill players out there that are not a focal point of the offense, but they do so well in helping the focal points of the offense. And the other thing too, on that Steelers offense, and I think that one of the things that we tend to look for is, well, who's their wide receiver 2? Who's their wide receiver 3? And when you've got a tight end like Freiermuth with his pedigree and with his potential, I don't care who their wide receiver 2 or 3 is. I'm not going to have them on my roster, period. But yeah, that does open up a lot of opportunity for Freiermuth.
And like another player that, like, to me, we talk about who to fade in this offense. Someone that I know, Jeff, I've been high on. It's Roman Wilson, man. Like, I like Roman Wilson. I am drafting Roman Wilson, but I am drafting other players ahead of Roman Wilson because I don't know how often he's going to be out there. I genuinely think they're going to run out there with the power formation a lot and pass out of that a lot. They're just going to have George Pickens as one wide receiver and then roll out. I'm not joking. Like Hayward, Freiermuth, and Darnell Washington. That will not surprise me that they have the highest 3 tight end rate, So to me, Roman Wilson is kind of the odd man out. I'm not saying that you shouldn't draft him because I think he's a decent player and he can have a role. I just think it's the smallest one in this offense.
Yeah, don't be shocked when this team, because Arthur Smith, one of the few teams that did use the fullback, and they went out and got Jack Coletto, and you can use Connor Hayward and those guys in that situation, and that just further consolidates things. You want to see a fullback in the offense. Patrick Ricard and Alec Ingold, and the Texans use one from time to time because they run the same scheme as the 49ers, right? They use Andrew Beck, and they drafted somebody that apparently also plays some fullback. Oh no, they didn't draft somebody. They brought in Ben Skronik, who actually plays an odd amount of fullback. Yes, if you go back and watch his highlights, very strange amount of fullback, but that's great for the top 2 wide receivers. That's another discussion entirely that we don't need to get into. But if they use a fullback, who's coming out of the game? Probably Tank Dell.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's scary. It scares me, but this is a tight end show.
Stop
no, it's
stop letting Desmond Ridder make decisions for you.
Right.
I'm done. Sorry.
no, Roman Wilson is like why it's so interesting to watch the draft with a football fan and just a pure football hat versus like a dynasty manager hat,
Yeah.
because I pumped my fist as a football fan when Roman Wilson landed with the Steelers because he's got a no block, no rock mantra. He's a big player, but as a fantasy, my dynasty hat said, well, I'll scratch him off my list because I just don't know that that's going to happen there. But we can move into tier 5 now for the sake of time. We got Isaiah Likely, Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, Jatavian Sanders, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Cole Kmet, and Theo Johnson. And really, this is just your grab bag of some young, maybe ascending players, some just really kind of some placeholder vets. And then we talked about the handcuff with Isaiah Likely.
Yeah. This is a double whammy. So I need both of you to keep me grounded. Hunter Henry, I love him, man. I'm an Arkansas and a Patriots fan. And I don't think Hunter Henry sucks. He was just marooned in bad situations and had a bit of an injury issue with the Chargers, but he's been pretty healthy. I think the Patriots like him. I'm not too worried about Jaheim Bell. Hunter Henry's someone that, again, I've felt comfortable having him as my tight end too. So I'll end there and let you guys bring me back down.
I think. Well, here's the thing for those at home. Jagger has him ranked at 19. I have him ranked 17, and then somebody else on the sheet here has him ranked 28th. If we were to go ahead and change that to 18, which would be the average of our two, that would move him up towards the top of this tier, right there with like Michael Mayer and Dallas Goedert. So I think it's Jeff that needs to explain to us why he's got Hunter Henry ranked out there in the stratosphere.
Why do you hate the Patriots?
Why do you hate? Why do you hate me? Why don't you want us to be happy, dude?
You're adding Jalen Polk in that offense. And you're adding Javon Baker into that offense.
Oh, no.
To me, Hunter Henry is a really strong, solid football player. But if I'm devising offense, I'm not putting Hunter Henry on the top of my list of I need to get the player that ball.
What if you're Alex Van Pelt and you're devising an offense?
Well, I would wait, and then I would have Luther Burden next year, and I would make sure that Drake May doesn't get broken, and then I would have a functional NFL offense, and that's kind of the way that I would view that. So,
here's my argument.
Jacoby Brissett, we wish you the best, but I do think that Hunter Henry's nice in terms of I think Hunter Henry's a very, very good football player, and he can pick up production in an uncertain situation. Definitely can score you some touchdowns there. It's just that I would want to see if I'm the Patriots where I'm at in my build right now. I would want to see what I got out of Polk and Baker. I would probably be planning in my mind that I'm adding a top wide receiver after this year, and I would be playing Brissett in self-preservation mode is kind of the way I would see it. And so there's definitely a situation where Brissett, the veteran, and Hunter Henry, the veteran, would play if they're playing together, are leaning on each other, or even Henry as kind of that crutch for a young rookie quarterback. But I think that and throwing Pop Douglas into the mix too, I kind of want to know what I've got in my receiver room before I'm looking to move forward.
Yeah. Well, here's the arguments in favor of Hunter Henry is that this guy has been good at the most difficult part of the job, which is winning in man-to-man. He's actually this entire time he's been very good versus man-to-man, and that makes him very good in the red area and in the end zone. That's why he keeps scoring touchdowns. Is he can get open and score the hunter gets in the hen house all the time. Because he can get separation in small areas, kind of like Zach Ertz, right? Zach Ertz is my comp for that type player. And Jatavian Sanders would fall in the same one, where he doesn't really have the speed, but he can get open and he catch the ball when you get it to him. The one thing that's been missing for Hunter Henry are those freebies, right? We talk about David Njoku and Evan Engram getting all these screens. Just them alone, not the position group, just them alone, they got 20 screens, right? Now Alex Van Pelt called those 20 screens to David Njoku. If you guys had to guess, how many tight end screens do you think the Patriots called as a team last year? Just throw a number, just any guess.
3.
That would be high.
So 1?
0. They called none. It just wasn't in the playbook. It wasn't in the playbook, and Mike.
That's too creative. That's too creative.
Or you add Jaheim Bell. I mean, Jaheim Bell's not going to be winning downfield. You get him in the ball and allow him to get him the ball and allow him to create off a screen, and that's where I see that play.
I think that's great for Jaheim Bell, and that's why we have Jaheim Bell ranked pretty high too. But he's a 7th round pick, and to be honest, 7th round pick. The question isn't whether they're going to play. The question is whether they're going to make the team, because a lot of those guys actually end up getting cut. So you got to look around and ask yourself, when I get to this range of players, especially in redraft, the question shifts from why. Early on, I'm like, why am I drafting Travis Kelce? Why am I drafting Mark Andrews? The question shifts to why not, right? And when I look around at some of these teams and I see, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I say that's probably why not. That's probably why they're not going to be a top 2 target on the team. When I look around and I see KJ Osborne and Kendrick Bourne and a couple rookies and, Pop Douglas, love Pop though, Pop. But still, even then, I say, yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know who's going to be number 1. Who would you guys think is going to lead the team in targets if you had to venture a guess? Who would you put your money on? Polk, yeah, the rookie.
Polk,
yeah, so second round rookie. That's who you would bet on. But we've seen rookies face plant all the time, unfortunately, with this organization all the time. Like Tyquan Thornton was a second round pick. What's he up to? No one's even said his name, right? So we don't know how it's going to pan out, especially early on. There's a very real possibility that Hunter Henry is the second target behind Polk or could be the top target on the team. I mean, last year the top target on the team was Ezekiel.
Mid-May is the height of the player drafted outside of the top 200 that is going to take out the job of the 6-year veteran. So that is kind of where we're at that point in the calendar.
We are
Jack,
there.
I mean, the Patriots are your team. Do you have anything to expand off that?
No, I mean, Coop's a Pats fan too. He said everything I said. That Jaheim Bell is someone I'm blowing fab on, and I'm like, man, I can't wait to drop you off my taxi squad and be sad next.
I know. Because I love Bell. I love the Bell's profile coming in too, and then he landed with the Pats. I was like,
and then I was surprised he fell so far, but yeah, he's someone that I like to target. But like I said, Polka's probably the guy. Baker, I'm trading back into the 3rd round to try to secure in rookie drafts. There's a lot to like there. Pop Douglas is someone I'm hanging. Basically, the Pats are like the absolute, almost cursed that almost the worst version of the Packers. Right. They are the Temu Packers right now, where there's a lot of noodles. Get your favorite guy and hope that it sticks. Probably none of them will stick, but let's just.
I think it's kind of like the Giants to me last year before they added neighbors, where you've got people loved Wan'Dale Robinson, and there was some people that really liked Jalen Hyatt. I mean, Blitnikoff winner Jalen Hyatt, but then you don't have. Wide receiver room is like a basketball team, and if you don't have a player out there that can score you 25 points, you're going to look pretty bad. And you do have one of those players, it allows players to fit into their roles more naturally.
Yeah, the Packers are like Starburst, where there's you don't know which. There's debates on which one's the best, but they're all pretty good. And then the Patriots are like jelly beans, where they're all kind of good. But
so
everyone's got their favorite.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Packers tight ends, because there's a lot of excitement questions around the Packers tight ends. To me, it's a classic profile of Kraft as an inline tight end who got some targets when Luke Musgrave went out. Musgrave is more of that outline, that guy that can play slot, potentially can move around. Coop, do you have anything to build off of that?
Well, the thing is, so Jagger has Tucker Kraft ahead of Luke Musgrave, and I have Luke Musgrave ahead. But then you came in and bailed me out by ranking Tucker Kraft tight end 755. So I have Luke Musgrave tight end. I have Luke Musgrave tight end 15 and Tucker Kraft tight end 20, which the arguments that I would have with Packers fans wouldn't be as drastic as the one that you might have with saying Tucker Kraft isn't that good. But I totally understand where you're coming from, because that's where I live too, is that Luke Musgrave won the job. He was drafted earlier. He won the job. Over the first 8 games, Tucker Kraft got 2 targets, right? So the argument for Tucker Kraft is this. You need to make the argument that Tucker Kraft, when Luke Musgrave got hurt, came in and played so well that he, because of injury, which, we all know that they say you can't lose your job due to injury, but you can, right? That Tucker Kraft leaped over Luke Musgrave, and he's now the top tight end, and he's going to run more routes. For me, I look at it and I say, okay, Luke Musgrave, not only did Luke Musgrave get hurt, but all these other wide receivers got hurt. And even then, Tucker Kraft only got to 6 targets max in one of these games, whereas when everyone was healthy, Luke Musgrave was getting 7, 8 targets. And the worst case scenario for these guys is that they both play. And in that scenario, as the tight end coach, I look around and I say, who am I going to have run routes? Who am I going to have block? Well, Luke Musgrave, you're not going to have him block. So there is a case for Tucker Kraft to be the guy. But if it were that drastic, in my opinion, if it were that drastic, the Packers would and should trade Luke Musgrave now, the way the Ravens did with Hayden Hurst, who they took before Mark Andrews, before they let the cat out of the bag themselves. The worst thing the Packers could do for their organization and for the value of these players is to start Tucker Kraft and make Luke Musgrave a backup, because they'll vaporize the value of this guy that's viewed as a valuable player. Imagine instead of the Ravens trading Hayden Hurst for, I believe, a second-round pick. He was a first-round pick. They traded for a second-round pick. Imagine the Ravens come out the next year and they just play Mark Andrews the whole time and Hayden Hurst is on the bench. Now you got to turn around. What are you going to get back for Hayden Hurst? A fifth-round pick, a fourth-round pick? If that's the case, they should trade Luke Musgrave now. What I've heard from them is they're going to use both tight ends, and if they're going to use both tight ends, then Luke Musgrave is probably going to run more routes, in my opinion. The big killer is that they got all these wide receivers, so I don't know what this offense is going to look like. How are you going to use two tight ends and then also find the snaps for
4 wide receivers?
Right. I mean, like,
none of them are fantasy relevant. I mean, whoever scores a touchdown is like
Christian
grab
Watson.
a best ball dart when you've got Jordan Love, and that's kind of the way I view the Packers.
Makes you want to draft Jordan Love and nobody else, in my opinion.
Yep.
Like, believe it or not, Luke Musgrave was that's who my tight end 3 was, because I was pretty sure. Yeah, it was Luke Musgrave. To me, here's my reasoning to have Tucker Kraft. Like, he looked pretty good towards the tail end, and I think that the Packers, and this is narrative street, guys. Like, here's where you can turn off the pot. No, I'm just kidding. I always listen. But narrative street here is that the Packers, again, the old noodle analogy is that they threw a bunch of noodles at the wall. They're like, whoever sticks gets a job. Like, we got a quarterback, we got a system. Whoever's going to ball out, they're going to play. So, like, to me, Luke Musgrave is looking real Christian Watson-y in this scenario, where, like, yeah, the athleticism's there, all the things that you like, but, like, Tucker Kraft is available, and good enough. And but again, that's not like a strong argument, because all the things that you said, you know how much Luke Musgrave I have? I have a lot, a concerning amount. Like, where I'm like thinking, like, do I need to drop him or whatever? So, like, I'm all about Luke Musgrave. I'm not really going to push back on you.
I've been digging into this, and there's arguments to be made on both sides. That's the beauty of fantasy football. And I can give you one additional Tucker Kraft argument that could be used on either side, but a lot of the information I've found suggests that Tucker Kraft did not pick up the playbook well early, and that he struggled with that. But then the comments during the season and down the stretch were, he was the guy where they said, nobody's improved more than this player, and this guy's figuring it out, and it's clicking with this guy. So the argument can be made on one side that, maybe Luke Musgrave is a little more football savvy and he picked it up better. I mean, his uncle is Bill Musgrave, right? Who's like a football, like a football royalty type name. But then the flip side is that, well, what if Tucker Kraft was just better the entire time? He just took him a little longer to figure things out. So it's so difficult with these situations that the move might be to sell them both while they're hot and while they're names, because I like Christian Watson and Jaden Reed, and I like Romeo Doubs, and I like Dontavian Wicks, and I like Bo Melton, and I also kind of like. So
you hit exactly, where I wanted to go. I'd love to dig into. Maybe I created a project for myself, but dig into the numbers a little bit. But I think in Dynasty, you have those second-year mystery boxes, and my gut tells me that if you sell those second-year mystery boxes for either picks or to tier up with players, you're going to come out ahead a lot more often than if you're just playing it out and seeing what you got.
I'll tell you though, dude, the numbers do say that, but it's so hard to get past the numbers. Like, I wrote an article a couple of years ago where I was like, here's a list of guys to sell now while people want them. And the list was like Darnell Mooney, Gabe Davis, Jacoby Myers, right? And you would think, oh yeah, good job selling those guys. But Amon-Ra St. Brown was also. So the great pain. So selling all those guys for, Preston Williams is on the list, selling all those guys for first, mostly second round picks, at the end of the day, probably generated you a lot of value. But you got to deal with the gigantic, horrible pill that you have to swallow when in that mix of guys, one of them ends up being a superstar and defies the odds, right? Same thing with like if you took all the day 3 picks and traded them away 5 years ago or 7 years ago, then you probably got a lot back. But you probably also traded away Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs somewhere in there. So it's like you got to truly be the boring dude that sits at the blackjack table and sticks to the system to enjoy trading away all those guys and knowing that in that mix you let go of you let go of Stephon Diggs, but somewhere in there you probably got back Terry McLaurin or Chris Godwin or Aaron Jones and some of these like late second, early third round guys. You know what I mean? Like it's very painful to stick to the system. It's a lot more fun to hang on to all your late round guys and just quietly in the middle of the night drop Keelan Cole, but have Amon-Ra St. Brown still, right? Like, so it depends how you want to play. I have no problem trading all those guys away because I know the numbers, but it does hurt. Like, it does hurt. And people on my timeline on Reddit remind me all the time. They're like, dude, you said to trade Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I was like,
All right, we better wrap
I'm in
up.
a 28-man safe. I'm in a 28-man safe league roster, and
What?
somebody dropped Amon-Ra St. Brown before 12-player 28-man roster. Somebody dropped Amon-Ra St. Brown right before he took off, and I'm like that.
like
guy,
he's as a rookie, he wasn't doing a damn thing until week like 10.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not crazy, but
Yeah.
that hurts.
So tier 6, close us out for the sake of time. Juwan Johnson, Chigoziem Okonkwo, Greg Dulcich, Cade Otton, Jonnu Smith, Erick All. And you guys question my Cade Otton. Cade Otton doesn't come off the field, and I think that if one of those top two targets goes down, he's the evolutionary Tyler Higbee, right, where you never ever want to put him into your lineup, but he's always going to end up being tight end 15 on the end of your standings, and so that's probably why he's ranked where he is for me.
Cade Otton,
you're an Ohio State guy. Does Cade Stover bother you or anything like that? Or not? Who did they just draft?
No, the Bucks didn't draft anybody, I don't think.
They did. They added they added Devin Cole.
That's who it is
from Washington. Yeah.
No, that doesn't bother
447.
me.
Yeah, he's more.
They have Coke Keefe and they have Payne Durham, the Purdue guy. So they've got some other younger options, but Otton literally doesn't leave the field.
Cade Otton to me, and again, he had a great playoffs. Cade Otton to me, and he was also great while Chris Godwin was dealing with his like neck, elbow, back combo crunch injury or whatever the hell that was mid-season. But Cade Otton to me, it's like I don't see how people love Dallas Goedert but don't like Cade Otton because he's just younger, healthier, third fiddle. That if one of the two wide receiver gets hurt, he's a dog. Like, what's the difference between Dallas Goedert and Cade Otton?
I'll tell you, the difference between them is when Goedert was coming up, we were so desperate for literally any tight end option, and now we're just rich with Kincaid and LaPorta and McBride, and you got Bowers coming. It is just a different landscape than even 2 to 3 years
ago. That period was so funny, dude. Just all my buddies in my league sitting there with my buddies like, I got Jonnu Smith and OJ Howard and Dallas Goedert. I'm rich. I'm like, I'm just waiting for the money to come in. Like, when's that money coming in, dude?
Erick All, are you two buying before we go?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, for free. Or I'll throw a chip on Tanner McLaughlin too and see which direction that breaks.
I like Erick All. If you take all the stats and put him in a spreadsheet, his yards per route run is second right behind Brock Bowers. And, he ended up transferring to the tight end factory. He just had, if you could get beyond the spine surgery and the knee and all that, then yeah, you can live with it. He got drafted. That's what matters.
Yep,
he did. All right. Well, I think that is a natural wrap-up spot, and so we want to take a moment. Thank you so much for being here, Coop. Do you have anything that you want to push out, and what are you working on right now?
Yeah, you actually mentioned it at the top, and I really appreciate that. Is that right now our best ball guide? We're really digging in on that, and because so many people are playing, and this is Dynasty season's over. Now it's best ball season, and the Scott Fish Bowl in July kicks off the start of redraft season for us. So right now we have our best ball guide available. You can pick that up now if you're not a Fantasy Alarm member. And honestly, it's got all my rankings at every position in there, not just in linear fashion, but as I mentioned, I hate linear rankings. So I put tiered rankings in there. So you get like 6 players in each group and you can diversify your best ball portfolios. If you like the things I have to say on here, all my rankings are in there. You can essentially get my tight end rankings before everybody else by buying that over at fantasyalarm.com/bestball. So that's what I got going on. Otherwise, if you follow me over at Coop A Fiasco, letter A, then you can, I post everything that I do, including this podcast, man. Thank you guys for having me on. I think this is the first Football Guys podcast I've been on.
Oh,
Love
hell yeah.
that. So
Cool.
happy to have you on. But
Thank you.
for the Football Guys Dynasty show, I'm Jeff Bell, and Jag, take us out.
I'm Jagger May, and remember to like, subscribe, do all the social media stuff, and then we'll see you on probably Thursday.